That's funny, he went that way. He came this way. Oh, I don't have a.
Okay. We all fired up, ready to go? Okay. Please rise and join me in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. Kay, could you call the roll?
Dennis,
Here.
Harold,
Here.
Hollenbaugh,
Here?
Phipps,
Here.
Robinette,
Here.
Roland,
Here.
Zanfordino.
Here.
Okay. The minutes from our February 1st meeting have been distributed for your review. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right. Correspondence. Kay, do we have any correspondence?
Yes, I have one piece of correspondence from a citizen, Kimberly Burnham, and she lives at 17485 Bar Road in Bowling Green. And copies of this particular piece of correspondence was distributed to you all via the email. So you should have that in your email, and I will make it a part of the minutes.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
All right. Thank you very much. That brings us to lobby visitations. Kay, has anyone signed up for lobby visitations?
Yes, Joseph DeMar.
Okay. Mr. DeMar, if you could come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Great. Yes, my name is Joseph DeMar. My address is 517 South Main Street, Bowling Green, Ohio. I have to add one of the houses with the longest stretch of sidewalk in the city, which meant quite a bit of shoveling this morning. I'm sorry to have to come back to the council to talk about the same topic I did at the last meeting, but I have become a little concerned. I know that the council has asked for more information from Brian O'Connell about the city's fees and fines and penalties for installing solar power in the city. And I'm concerned, based on some reports I've seen in the local media, that the council may not be getting a fully accurate picture of what these fees and fines do and how they're calculated from Mr. O'Connell. There might be a little bit of bias there. And so I thought I wanted to come back and just answer some of the points that he's made to the city in public, in case he's making the same points to you, in order so that you can have more information to make your decisions on this. And to be clear, what we are asking is for the city to reverse the ordinance, to eliminate the penalties and the fees that have been put in place. So one thing to start off with, Mr. O'Connell has characterized these fees as being a necessity because he says those of us who have solar power in the city are not paying our fair share of the costs for wires and poles and transformers and so forth. And this is, on the face of it, immediately untrue, because we do pay our fair share. We pay the full price for electricity, just as any other customer in the city of Bowling Green. Every kilowatt hour that I buy from the city, and I have to buy every hour of the night and a lot of days. And in fact, yesterday my panels were covered in snow. I didn't actually put any power on the Bowling Green grid. And for every one of those kilowatt hours, I pay the full price. I pay my fair share for every kilowatt hour I use. And it's the same for every owner of solar power in the city of Bowling Green. Now, the fee that he's charging, even if you were to grant him this argument, the amount that they're charging, $4 per installed kilowatt every month forever, is way too high. So we're going to get a little bit mathematical here, a little bit of technical stuff. Right now, Bowling Green charges its customers, based on my electric bill, roughly 12.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, 10 cents of that, and we're doing a little bit of approximating and rounding, but these are very close. 10 cents of that is what's called the cost of electricity and transmission. That is, this is what Bowling Green pays that coal plant in Indiana for its electricity, and then it's what it pays PJM to transfer that power from Indiana to the city of Bowling Green. Now, the remainder, 2.5 cents, that's what's called delivery. And so those are the three parts of every electric bill in the country: generation, transmission, and delivery. And delivery, as you can see, is only 2.5 cents, less than a quarter of the cost. And so by my calculations, my electric bill has gone down somewhat since I've installed solar. It's gone down by roughly half, but only 2.5 cents, only less than a quarter of that half are the delivery costs that Brian O'Connell is talking about. The rest, the majority of it, the 10 cents out of the 2.5 cents, are for the transmission and the electricity that I don't buy. So he's penalizing us for electricity that we don't buy. And the argument is that because we buy less, we're not paying our fair share for the poles and delivery. And I reject that on the top because it's exactly the same as if I were to conserve power in my home. If I were to switch to LEDs, if I were to switch to energy efficiency appliances, if I were to cut my use of electricity in half by conservation measures, it's exactly the same. And are we going to start penalizing people who do that now? I don't think so. I don't think the city should do that. And he doesn't give any justification for cutting our reimbursement for power from the current wholesale rate, which the city pays, about 10 cents a kilowatt hour, cutting that down to 5.5 cents. He doesn't give any kind of justification for paying us less than half the wholesale rate for our electricity, even though our electricity is just as good. Even better, actually. I'll take my solar power over coal power any day. And the fact that there's also the fact that the poles and the wires and the transformers don't care if the power is coming into my home or going out of my home. There's literally no difference for the grid, made by the fact that my house is producing power as opposed to just using the power. He has compared this fee to the EV, the electric vehicle fee that the state of Ohio charges. And that is a faulty analogy because electric vehicles do cause wear and tear on the roads. In fact, you could make an argument they cause a little more because they're a little heavier. But having power flowing from my house into the grid does not cause any additional wear and tear on the wires and poles. BG has exactly the same costs for that as it would if I didn't put any power on the grid. Also, it just so happens that my home uses more power than the average Bowling Green resident. And this is because I have a plug-in hybrid van. I have a plug-in Chrysler Pacifica, which I love. It gets about 100 miles to the gallon in the summertime. In the cold wintertime like this, it gets about 30. But I use power from the city to charge my van. That's how I get around. And so by his logic, shouldn't the city give me a break because I actually use more power than the average customer because I have a plug-in hybrid? I mean, that argument should cut both ways. And finally, I just wanted to mention that it's almost 2 years ago to the day that I stood before the Ohio State Legislature to argue against something called House Bill 6. And I have to say, this kind of smells the same. This smells like House Bill 6 because in that case, there were scores of people who were opposed to it from all across the political spectrum. And we gave many reasons and justifications why that was a bad bill. And the legislature went ahead and pushed it through anyway for the benefit of a few corporations. And it feels like Mr. O'Connell's more concerned about the AMP coal plant selling enough electricity to the city than they are about the future of clean energy in Bowling Green. And it's really pretty discouraging and to be arguing this. And those of us who have solar power are looking into actions we might take. There's consideration of perhaps going to the city and perhaps going to court because of the idea that we installed our panels with a certain idea about how much we were going to get back. The interconnection agreement is essentially like a contract with the city, and the city has decided to just change the terms of that contract. Some of us might take that route, but I'm not really interested so much in my own personal economic hardship that this is going to cause. I'm much more interested in the future of Bowling Green, because right now there's about 5 households with solar in Bowling Green. And Mr. O'Connell has said publicly he's got applications for 3 more. That is not nearly enough. There should be hundreds of solar panels on roofs in Bowling Green. And that will not happen if these fees are allowed to stand. And I just want to, in conclusion, I want to read a little something. A fellow named Jim, and somebody might help me with his pronunciation of his name, Trampavesky. And he had planned to put solar panels on his roof. He had hired a contractor. He was all set to go. Then he found out about these fees and he canceled. And I'm sure, even though there's still 3 applications out, I'm sure he's not alone, because once you look at the economics based on these numbers, they just don't make any sense. And in fact, we've been talking with some professors from Michigan Technical University who study pricing and tariffs on solar power and things. And according to those professors, they have never heard of a solar fee at this level anywhere else in the country. We may have, if this goes into effect, we may have the distinction of being the most hostile city towards solar power in the United States. So anyway, Mr. Trampesky has, I asked him if I could quote him on this whole issue, and he said, "We can do better than this as a community. If we are to truly make progress, we should incentivize members to help make a positive impact and not punish them." And I think that pretty much sums up the way I feel about this. And I'm hoping that the city council, and I'll just remind Mr. Hollenbaugh, he's probably told the students that the right to petition the government is paramount in a democracy. And the reason you folks are here is because sometimes the professionals get it wrong. They got it wrong 10 years ago when they locked the city into a bad deal with a coal plant. And now we're locked for another 40 years to pay expensive, overpriced power from coal plants. That was a big mistake. This is another big mistake. And you guys aren't here to rubber stamp what the professionals tell you. You're here to evaluate it, to make your own decisions, and to look out for the future of Bowling Green, and not so much the profits of coal plants in other states. That's it. Thank you. Unless the council has any questions.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your views on this. I will say that I don't see the comparison with House Bill 6. I know I personally have not received any part of $60 million in kickbacks.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that, Mr. Hollenbaugh.
So, but thank you. And rest assured that I have not yet had a chance to read Brian's comments because I didn't receive them until Friday. And I've been a little busy with something called historic preservation this weekend. So I've heard your input on this twice and his not at all yet. So take comfort in that fact.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Yes.
Mr. DeMar, I just want to add that I am very insulted that you would stand before city council and compare us to one of the biggest bribery schemes that took place in the United States. You don't have to answer. I just want to let you know. I think that's very low.
I would like to answer though, Ms. Rowland. What I said was it feels the same.
It may feel for you.
Exactly.
It may feel for you.
Yeah.
And that's one
not-
person, but to come before us and say this is a
I'm not
very
ac-
big
I'm not
insult.
accusing anyone in the city council or in the city government or in the municipal utilities of any sort of wrongdoing. All I'm saying that as a citizen who saw something done that was opposed to the future, something done that hurt the switch over to renewable energy at the state level, it feels very upsetting to see that now happening at a city level.
And I'm going to add that this was handled by the utility department, people who know what they're doing, people who can answer every little detail of what was done and why it was done. You should be before the utility commission talking about this and not before us. And I hope you'll treat them with respect.
The utility commission has already made their decision, and my experience with the trying to convince the utility commission not to go into a contract with the coal plant 10 years ago was that they pretty much listened to what they were told by the professionals and just went that way. And so they've already made their decision. I'm asking the city council to overturn that decision. I don't see any chance that they're going to reverse themselves on their decision. And this, as I said, this is why we're allowed to petition the government, because the city council can act as a check and a balance on the utilities commission when it makes a mistake, like the mistake it just made. And so I'm very sorry that you were offended, Sandy. I did not mean to impugn the reputation of anyone in the city council or in the city government.
It's a very bad comparison, let me tell you. And I do suggest that you save your time and go before the utility commission. What the utility commission did years and years ago is not even the same commission. They roll over. So you need to go back to them and talk to the experts and say what you say to them about your knowledge of this and let them make a recommendation to city council, and we'll take that into advice.
Well, I appreciate the advice, Sandy, but I literally don't see that being anything that would resolve,
Okay.
I don't see that as being a profitable use of my time. Thank you.
right.
Mr. President, I did have a question or a point of clarification here, I guess, on this issue.
Is it for me?
Well,
is your
from
question
Mr.
for me?
DeMar, or more, I guess maybe the larger group, this is not an ordinance that we voted on, is it? The Board of Public Utilities has the ability to set rates as they see fit without any input from
This
council.
is, yes,
We confirm it.
yes, we did pass it.
And what date was that decision made?
Oh, we're talking about the rate? No, the rates, they set the rates.
I'm aware that we've given authority to the Board of Public Utilities to make this decision, but it's been characterized now at 2 city council meetings in addition to the media as a decision by city council, and that is not in fact accurate, is it?
And no, the Utilities Commission sets their rates.
And do we have the ability to overturn policy set by them short of rewriting the, I don't know if that's the charter or if that's an ordinance located somewhere in the code?
Historically, we have not availed ourselves of that.
So this is something that has never been done before.
Mr. President, I suggest that we have the city attorney answer these questions.
That would be awesome, because I'm not an attorney.
Yeah. The question that Jeff's bringing forth, and he beat me to the punch, is does city council have the ability, I know historically we haven't done it, but does city council have the ability to change the rates and fines that are set up by the Board of Public Utilities? No. Okay, thank you, Mike. And so the answer to Jeff's very astute question is we as city council, as per the charter, do not have the ability to do what it is you wish us to do.
And if we wanted to change that, isn't it correct that that would need to go to a vote of the citizens of Bowling Green at the next election? Isn't that the process for changing the charter?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm the new guy.
Okay.
All right.
Rachel has a question, and I have a comment, Mark.
Oh, boy. Go ahead, Rachel.
Well, let me see. Can you hear me? Yes, you can.
It's a legal question. I'm sending you straight to Mike Marsh.
It's not a legal question. It's just a general comment. I mean, I do think that we have a role to play here in discussing whether or not we want to be incentivizing renewable energy, residential renewable energy installations. I mean, I think that's entirely appropriate for us to be talking about. And I want to learn more about this issue. And then just kind of well, no, I'll leave it there. I just think that we should, short of, if we would decide as a community that it doesn't make sense for our utility to be incentivizing PV residential installations anymore. I mean, there's other incentives that our community could consider, and that would be something like just issuing a one-time grant. I mean, I just think that this is something I would hate for us to not, take a look at Brian O'Connell's memo and talk about this in a little bit more detail, because I do want to learn more about this issue.
Mr. President.
Mr. Harold.
Such enthusiasm. To piggyback on what Rachel said, I had a chance to talk to Brian and get an idea of the reasoning that he used and the options that we as council members have, and perhaps a way to address.
Could I jump in just for a second?
Yeah, I mean, you're president.
All right, thank you. Rachel, I agree. I don't believe it's outside of our purview, to discuss possibly incentivizing various sources of energy. And I'm certainly open and willing to have a conversation about that. However, I don't feel this evening during lobby visitation is that time. So if you're planning on going into some detail as options we could take, I'd rather have that discussion sometime other than during lobby visitation.
I respect that.
Okay.
Then I will hold my comments also, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
I share Sandy's concern at her disdain over the comments. I would also like to suggest that as a council, we are not obligated to entertain personal attacks on members of this administration from members of the community. Our lobby visitation is an opportunity to come and explain issues or address issues with council. I am offended, and I apologize to Mr. O'Connell because we as a council didn't step in and stop this travesty. This was uncalled for. And Mr. President, I will, in the future, if someone attacks a member of this administration using this forum, I'll do everything within my power to stop it if you don't.
I guess I do want to speak,
Thank you,
Mr.
Greg.
President. I don't feel that we were being told we took a bribe to have this happen, and that's how we seem to be taking it. I do feel that House Bill 6 has been referred to as the worst environmental law in America. Not in the South, in Ohio. So, I have concerns about the fees that we're learning about, and I now know we have no authority, but I don't want to be on record as being disinterested in this issue. I think we need to incentivize a different future, and this is not that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Zanfordino. Anyone else have anything they'd like to say?
I just want to say that if anybody wants to make comments, disparaging comments to council, that is your right. But I also echo what Greg said. It may be a right to say that certain people are, to disparage certain people. It may be a right, but we've seen all too often, particularly at the national level, how that is very counterproductive. One of the reasons that I'm on council is to try and be some sort of a firewall between the craziness in Washington and local government. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to be someone that approaches it as government should be approached. And so, yes, there is the opportunity to say things to us. There is freedom of speech, but I think that it is very reasonable to request a bit of decorum. And we have thick skins. We can't be on council if we don't have thick skins. So we have a bit of tolerance for it when you direct it to us, but let's have some decorum. And that's my heartfelt request for people addressing us.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Anybody else? Okay. This concludes lobby visitations, which brings us to the introduction of new legislation.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
on behalf of the Finance and Ways and Means Committee, I have two ordinances. One, an ordinance providing supplemental appropriations for the current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Bowling Green, Ohio during the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2021 and ending December 31st, 2021. And second, an ordinance certifying unpaid cost of weed mowing to the county auditor for placement on the tax duplicate.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose. Go ahead.
Mr. President, on behalf of the Utility Committee, I have an ordinance authorizing the Utilities Director to enter into a real estate agreement for the exchange of real estate between the City of Bowling Green and McEwen Realty. And I have an ordinance authorizing the Utilities Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts for the transformer replacement at the Gypsy Lane substation.
All right. That brings us to official reports. Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to begin by saying thank you to Council Members Rowland and Robinette for your remarks related to comments directed to administration officials. Certainly, I join you in feeling as though they're very inappropriate. Glad to see everybody safe and accounted for after experiencing the most recent storm of the century last night. This really was a significant storm. According to a slide I saw on the 13 ABC warning weather website this afternoon, it was recorded 12.4 inches of snow in this most current snow event, placing it number 5 on the list in the biggest two-day snow events in Toledo, Northwest Ohio. The most significant snowstorm prior to yesterday was 13 inches that were recorded in June 6, 2014. So it's been a while. And also I wanted to mention, interestingly, this will resonate with some of the older folks in the room. The infamous blizzard of 1978, January 26, 1978 specifically, recorded 12 inches of snow. So again, this was a significant storm last night. And I just want to take a couple of minutes to recognize the efforts of our Public Works Division and other city officials that were responsible for assuring public health and safety during this significant event. I now have a much different perspective and appreciation for the difficulty of this task. I spent some time last night riding in a snowplow with one of our city or public works operators. And let me tell you, eye-opening experience says it. I was out somewhere between 8 and 9 o'clock last night, really kind of before the storm really got going. But I'll tell you what, when we were on the outer bands of the city, more rural roads, and experiencing the darkness because the sun had set, significant snow, significant winds, narrow roads, drifting, it's a frightening situation to be behind the wheel of a vehicle such as our city snowplows. I was really impressed with the operator's ability to do this work, and he's one of many. All of our public works staff are working 12-hour shifts continuously. even now in a cleanup effort following the storm. In addition, we spent some time going through our older neighborhoods where the streets are narrow and there's a number of cul-de-sacs. Try backing around with the snow flying the way it is and a snowplow of that size. And I know I couldn't do it. These people are skilled, they're dedicated, and we owe them a really big debt of gratitude for the work that they do. So that's what I want to do tonight. I want to draw attention to the work that they do continuously. We take it for granted, and we shouldn't, because they're highly skilled, dedicated people, and I know that we all agree that we appreciate the work that they do. So that's really my report this evening, pending any questions that you might have of me.
Are there any questions for the mayor? Thank you very much.
Yeah, Mr. President,
Mr. Dennis.
I would like to spend some time talking today about the unilateral action to put a hole in the side of City Park and route traffic through that area. I don't know if the mayor or the city administrator or the parks director would be in the best position to speak to that, but
I'm happy to speak to that. It was my decision. I approved it. When you say it's a unilateral decision, in this instance, it was a decision that I made after coordinating and discussing the matter with the Parks Director, the Public Works Director, and the City Administrator. It's an operational consideration that certainly is in my purview as mayor to make these sort of decisions. As I have been saying from the very beginning of the pandemic in March of 2020, it's incumbent upon us as a city organization to do all that we can do to support the efforts of our community partners. I think we all would agree that the school system is one of our most valued community partners. After assessing the situation and the request that was made of me by the superintendent of schools, my assessment was this was a situation that was worth trying. If it was going to alleviate the situation in terms of traffic congestion and all of the other challenges associated with pickup and drop off of school children, it's my opinion that it is operationally an appropriate action and certainly consistent with my views to support community partners. Having said all of that, we're mindful of the fact that we don't necessarily know what we don't know in terms of how this will work. So we are open to monitoring impacts on people using the parks, park traffic, school traffic. If there are modifications that can be made that can improve the situation, we're committed to considering those as they present themselves.
okay. I did have just a few people reach out to me and were a little bit concerned about what it would do to pedestrian traffic moving around that area of the park in those times of day. I know that we, well, I guess before we went back to work, or I went back to work, we're walking the dogs in that area quite a bit. And, you know, there's quite a bit of parking. You can maybe move off to the side if you need to, but for some folks walking around that area, I do want to make sure that we are being conscious of that, maybe exploring additional footpaths around that area if that's feasible.
Yeah, that was a consideration that was discussed in great detail. We're aware of those challenges. I'll remind you that the time periods that we're talking in terms of drop off and pickup is a roughly 30-minute time frame, once early in the morning, once later in the afternoon. So again, consideration was given to all of these things that you mentioned, and we will continue to monitor what it looks like, and we'll make adjustments as necessary. We're certainly mindful of the need to protect the health and safety of those that are utilizing the park.
I appreciate you doing what we can on behalf of the city government to extend a helping hand to the city schools. I think it's important to build those partnerships.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the mayor?
I just, Mr. President, I just wanted to commend you, Mike. You've been the mayor for a little over a year, and there have been occasions where you've taken bold action. For example, eliminating the parking meters, and I appreciate that. I understand that. You know, we're talking about the safety of those in the park. We're talking about actually, I've been in the Conneaut School area when there's been the discharging and the bottleneck and everything, and that's got to be a safety issue, even as a status quo. So I just want to commend you for taking a look at it and giving it a shot and adjusting as the need arises. And if it works, great. That's fantastic. If it doesn't work, maybe it can be adjusted. And if that doesn't work, then, fine, we move on to something else. What I thought was a very important characteristic was it was a temporary road. And so that speaks to, we're going to give it a shot. We're not going to make any permanent changes. We'll see how it works and adjust as we can. So the concerns that are brought up as part of the information gathering process that I'm sure you've taken to heart. And I'm kind of excited to see how it works out. So I just wanted to compliment you on finding opportunities to take that kind of bold action.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
I
you.
believe that's it. Thank you. Municipal Administrator, Ms. Treader. I do have one question, Lori. And I'm sure it's something you've probably sent out already today, but with the holiday on Monday and the snow today, I was wondering, people might have questions about trash collection.
So just as a reminder, you're right, we are on a delayed one-day schedule this week due to the President's Day holiday. We went ahead and picked up trash today. We do understand there were a few people who had trouble just due to the snow or other factors. We are asking that they call our Public Works Department. I'll go ahead and give that number if somebody's listening, but of course you can check on our website too. It's 419-354-6227 if you'd like to discuss your situation at your home if you were impacted. But otherwise, so again, actually that's a reminder that I didn't make it home from work tonight and I need to get my trash cans out for my delayed trash. So everyone will be, just the one day delayed.
Okay. I didn't know if the heavy snow impacted the ability to pick up trash.
We decided because we were already on that delayed schedule and we wanted to make sure everybody got trash picked up this week, that we would
Okay.
go ahead and keep on what we had already announced.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any further questions for Ms. Treader? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see. Who do we have with us this evening? City Attorney? Are there any questions for Mr. Marsh? Utilities Director, do you have a report?
I just wanted to let you know that there were no power outages from the snow, which was very thankful for. So the system held up very well from the snow, and there was an accident that did cause a guy wire to be clipped, but that didn't cause any customers to lose power during that event. So that was good news. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about was a letter that went out from Volunteer Energy. I got a copy of this from one of our customers. He brought it in and showed it to us. And some people don't always understand what the natural gas aggregation program is, or what these often look like they're scam letters, or somebody that sent you something you didn't ask for. But typically we set the rate is set for a 1 or 2 year period. Last I don't know back when, sometime in 2020, the rate was set at 0.405 per CCF. So it's 40.5 cents. And normally that rate would hold for the duration of that contract. And our gas aggregation program is basically another option for customers that are Columbia Gas customers, that they can use that as their natural gas supply if they would like to, or they can opt out and go somewhere else and pick a different supplier. They can go back to Columbia Gas's standard choice offer if they would like. There's no obligation for customers to be in the program, but it is an opt-out program. And so customers that are served by Columbia Gas, they're automatically enrolled in the program unless they decide to opt out. And if they have another supplier by contract and those customers are not affected, they keep those same contracts. But oddly, during my time, I've never seen this before, but Volunteer did send out another letter, and it references FERC rate case and some numbers effective February 1st of 2021. and that would then impact or change the gas aggregation price that our customers pay to or for their gas supply. I've never seen this before, but obviously FERC does regulate the gas industry, and my guess is this was likely a charge that was then passed through the transportation companies or the suppliers onto the customers to pay. So that new rate was going to be 0.4765 per CCF. So a decent increase. Again, one that we did not expect. The letters that went out explained some of this information. It did also offer another opt-out letter. So customers that were interested in getting out of the aggregation program, they could return. There's a little card at the bottom they can fill out and send back to volunteer to get out of the program if they would like. There's no penalty. There's no fee for that. And again, I've had some questions about it from some customers. I've tried to explain some things to as many people as I can when I do get the questions. But if you do get somebody that calls you and asks, is this a legitimate thing or not? It is legitimate. Looks like this. If you're a Columbia Gas customer, you probably have seen one. Again, the rate that was changed to should be in effect for the remainder of our previous contract or price that we had before. I don't recall the time frame for when that was, but it should be for another year and a half, I believe, if my memory is correct. Again, it's not something we typically see, but it was a unique experience or occurrence that I thought would be a good chance to let you know what was happening. And if you had questions or from residents that may have questions, you can say you can either call Brian or yeah, it's legitimate, and you can stay in the program. If they don't want to get out of it, they can stay in it. Just don't do anything, and your bill will still be from Columbia Gas, and your supplier will still be from Volunteer. But that's all I have, unless you have questions for me.
Are there any questions for Mr. O'Connell? All right, Brian, I just would like to thank not only you, but I see Mr. Kraft isn't here tonight. The only service I lost at home over this event was my internet, and you're not to blame for that. And the only problem I had navigating around town was getting out of my driveway, and Mr. Kraft isn't responsible for that. So
that's correct.
You guys have done a wonderful job of getting us through this. And I just wanted to thank you.
Yep, no problem. It's a pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. President?
Mr. Zanfordino.
Much like I couldn't see you earlier, I think you're missing Heather, who is here. And Heather, did you have a report for us tonight?
Well, yeah, I had already heard from her this evening. But Heather, you are welcome to make a report if you like. Okay. Does anyone have any questions that have not yet been answered by Heather? Okay. Thank you very much. Brings us to council committee reports.
Mr. President?
Mr. Zanfordino.
Tonight we had a public hearing regarding the ordinance that comes off the table tonight, our historic preservation ordinance and the affiliated changes to other chapters. We had a lengthy meeting, relatively speaking, and had some people speak on behalf of the ordinance and some people speak against it. Believe the entire Historic Preservation Commission was here, and they all spoke and were certainly very helpful in answering questions and making a very complex document understandable. So thank you, folks. And as of course we all know, this will come off the table tonight.
Okay. Any other council committee reports?
I just have a question about our next public hearing, which will be on March 1st. Okay, I've neglected to write down the time of that public hearing.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. Okay. And that public hearing will be to discuss a draft of legislation that has yet to be introduced, but we've received legislation regarding creating a rental registry in Bowling Green. And that's an outgrowth of a series of committee meetings that we had in early 2020 that were then interrupted by the pandemic. But what I'd like to say is that the draft that we have, and after the interruption in that committee process, we then had a meeting in November of last year to pick that process back up. And we spoke about breaking down our future registration/inspection system into two aspects. And, I just wanted to say that what we have to discuss on March 1st is just the first aspect. And in all honesty, the low-hanging fruit aspect. So given the minimal conversation I expect about that piece as opposed to the second piece, which will be rolled out, I was going to suggest moving that to 6:30, if that's okay with the other committee members. Or do you guys feel we'll need an hour to discuss the first piece?
Mr. President,
Yes.
may I respond?
Oh,
Naturally.
yes, I'm asking the committee members.
Yeah, but we have to funnel everything through the president.
Oh, no,
Um,
Mark's cool with this.
Yes.
Mark's cool.
Jeff, you can respond as well.
Okay, thank you.
I would say that it's better to err on the side of allowing too much time than not enough. We've been to enough council committee meetings to know that if we're starting to look at the clock, we're not really necessarily focused on what people are saying. And I guess I'd rather err on the side of having
Okay.
it early, but
No
if you
problem.
want to make it at 6:05, I don't have a problem.
It'll be 6:05 anyway.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Jeff, Mark is, the suggestion is 6:05 instead of 6 o'clock.
The only issue being discussed is rental registration, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, 6:05, whatever works best for the majority of the committee.
All right.
I'm available from 5 o'clock on, so we can
Excellent.
have as much time as you guys would like beyond that.
All right, thank you. So we'll stay with our convention of
6 o'clock.
6K.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Outstanding.
Mr.
Any,
President,
anything else? Yep, go ahead.
Before we get to reading of legislation, can you just remind us of the procedural box we find ourselves in with regard to the historic preservation legislation this evening and the possible ways forward?
Well, I was going to go into that in more detail when we got to the portion of the meeting where that's going to come off the table.
Okay, I just didn't understand if there would be time for discussion then or, but if there is, that's fine. I thought that perhaps discussion would be.
We have all night for
we have all
discussion.
night. All right, then I'll,
And maybe into tomorrow.
all right.
Okay. There you go. Okay, that brings us to the reading of legislation.
Legislation for first reading, ordinance number 8902 for first reading, ordinance providing supplemental appropriations for the current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Bowling Green, Ohio during the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2021 and ending December 31, 2021.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette,
I move to suspend the rules and give ordinance 8902 its second and third readings.
Second,
okay, properly moved and seconded. Okay,
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
yes,
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
yes,
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis.
Yes.
okay, the rules have been suspended for ordinance 8902.
Ordinance number 8902 for second and third reading, ordinance providing supplemental appropriations for the current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Bowling Green, Ohio during the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2021 and ending December 31, 2021.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette,
I move to adopt ordinance 8902.
second,
been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, Okay,
Hollenbaugh,
yes,
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette.
Yes.
Roland.
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold.
Yes.
all right. Ordinance 8902 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8903 for first reading. Ordinance certifying unpaid cost of weed mowing to the county auditor for placement on the tax duplicate. Ordinance number 8904 for first reading. Ordinance authorizing the utilities director to enter into a real estate agreement for the exchange of real estate between the city of Bowling Green and McEwen Realty. Ordinance number 8905 for first reading. Ordinance authorizing the utilities director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts for the transformer replacement at the Gypsy Lane substation. Legislation for second reading. Ordinance number 8901 for second reading. Ordinance authorizing the municipal administrator to enter into a contract with Hall and Associates Incorporated for design and engineering and to advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts for the construction of a Marks Communications Tower. Legislation for third reading. Resolution number 3788 for third reading. Resolution authorizing the city attorney to petition the Board of County Commissioners of Wood County, Ohio to change township lines.
Mr. President,
Ms. Phipps,
I move to adopt resolution 3788.
Second?
okay, properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, okay,
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh.
yes. Resolution 3788 is adopted.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette,
I move to amend ordinance 8896 by substitution. These amendments include the insertion of a table that outlines utilities and descriptions of vehicles in the utilities department, and also changes every occurrence of the phrase municipal administrator to municipal administrator and the utilities director.
okay,
I'll pass it around.
Oh.
So I can have it.
Yes.
so you've moved to amend the legislation.
Yes.
So do we voice vote that or do we roll call?
I need a
that?
second
Yeah,
and then a
second.
roll call.
Okay.
I'll second it.
All right,
then roll
it's
call.
properly been moved and seconded. Kay, could you call the roll?
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps.
Yes.
All right, so ordinance 8896 has been amended.
Ordinance number 8896 for third reading as amended. Ordinance authorizing the municipal administrator and the utilities director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts and/or participate in state of Ohio or federal purchasing programs for the purchase and/or lease of vehicles, equipment, and completion of projects, as well as the trade-in or outright sale of vehicles and equipment no longer needed for municipal purposes.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette,
I move to adopt ordinance 8896.
Second.
I properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Kay?
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 8896 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8897 for third reading. Ordinance authorizing the municipal administrator and the utilities director to enter into a contract or contracts with specified vendors for work that may exceed $50,000 annually for calendar year 2021.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette,
I move to adopt ordinance 8897.
Second?
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Kay?
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 8897 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8898 for third reading. Ordinance authorizing the municipal administrator to advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts for sidewalk improvements, pavement striping, de-icing salt, and improving streets, alleys, and other public ways in the city of Bowling Green, Ohio.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
I move to adopt ordinance 8898.
Second.
Okay, properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Kay?
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 8898 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8899 for third reading. Ordinance authorizing an agreement between the city of Bowling Green, Ohio, and the Wood County Regional Airport Authority.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
I move to adopt ordinance 8899.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Kay?
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland.
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis.
Yes.
Ordinance 8899 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8900 for third reading. Ordinance amending and adopting sections 31.05E and F of the codified ordinances of the city of Bowling Green regarding standing committees.
Okay. I move that we adopt ordinance 8900.
I enthusiastically second.
Okay, it's properly moved and seconded. I would like to say, as I open this up for discussion, that, thank you to Councilman Harold for bringing up this idea 3 meetings ago, I guess it was, noting that many of the issues that we have been facing of late have been sustainability-related issues, and that it would not be inappropriate to change our committee structure. And in conversation with members of council, strangely, it seems Mr. Harold had come up with a good idea. And and so that's led us to where we are right now. And with that, I open it up to discussion. Okay, no discussion on the matter. I will also say that because we are changing the committee structure, that between now and the next council meeting, there will be new committee assignments that I will be making. So, Kay, could you call the roll?
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland.
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 8900 is adopted. All right, which brings us to ordinance 8878, which will come off the table. I would like to say a few things about this before this happens. We're kind of in an unusual situation for city council where an ordinance has received 3 readings, but there are still questions surrounding it that have been brought to my attention by pretty much all of you over the course of the last 3 days. So my hope as we go through this is to have a discussion, discuss possible changes that might need to occur with this ordinance, discuss possible options that are available to us. I've heard suggestions for multiple options. One of the options that is not available to us is to simply retable this. So we have the option of an up or down vote on it, which apart from the fact that, it would still be work that had been put together, it would essentially kind of start the process over with a negative vote. Another option that's been made aware through Robert's Rule of Orders is the possibility of postponing a decision on this, possibly until a time when it could be in a form that everyone felt whatever shortcomings in it that might exist have been addressed. So those are some of the options that we have available to us. In listening to comments made by members of the Planning Commission, I heard a lot of members of the Planning Commission say that they support the notion of historic preservation. I didn't hear anyone in their comments say that they did not. And in individual conversations that I've had with members of council over the past several weeks, I am under the impression that members of city council support the idea of historic preservation. I guess the question before us is this what that historic preservation looks like, or is it not? So I hope that we can have a healthy discussion on this topic this evening. And with that, Ordinance 8878 has magically come off the table.
Magically. Mr. President, thank you for giving us a listing of of our options and what isn't an option. I think that regardless of how we proceed, I think it's very important that we clearly convey as best we can that we are in, and I hesitate to speak for all of council, so I'll speak for myself, that I'm in favor of historic preservation. I think that, and thankful for the yeoman's effort that the Historic Preservation Commission has put forth. They put many hours of blood, sweat, and tears into it, and it shows. I think we're roughly 85% there and only really need to be around 95% there. There's some, once the changes were made by the Historic Preservation Commission earlier this month, that gets us very close. There's some cleanup that may need to be done, and perhaps bouncing it back through the city attorney's office just to be sure. But the idea, regardless of the vote, whether it's voted up or down or postpone it indefinitely, I'm enthusiastically in favor of the concept. I'm thankful for the work that went on, and I think we're very close and just need to spend a bit more time on addressing the cleanup, the legalese, and then also this body has got a perspective that is different and as it should be than the Planning Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission, and that is we need to do what's in the best interest of the community, of course, but balance the freedom that people have with their properties with the community responsibility that we have. When you live in a city, you do give up certain freedoms for the good of the community, and most of those are just really not controversial. You have to mow your lawn, you have to shovel your sidewalks, and so that's just part of being in a community. But those are the types of things we need to address. And however the vote is, I just wanted to make it clear that I'm in favor of this. I just may need to have a little bit extra work done on it.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
before we get into any discussion on the merits of the ordinance, would you like me to give a brief explanation of one of the procedural tools that is available to us for members who may not be familiar with it?
Right, yeah, since you are the one that is what I'll consider an expert on Robert's Rules of Order.
One of the tools that's available to us in a situation like this, when the ultimate goal is to continue to address an ordinance, but we're up against a wall in terms of the ability to table it, there's a tool which would allow us to postpone indefinitely the motion. The way this would work if we executed this, a motion to adopt would be made and seconded. And then a motion that would put this motion in action. We would have an active motion. This motion could then be postponed indefinitely with the intent that the president could refer it to committee for the resolution of whatever issues come up with. This has a number of benefits. One, this motion is debatable, which means the substance of the ordinance can still be addressed in the debate portion on the motion to postpone. So debate it can be debated, therefore, and the debate is not limited. So anybody can talk on that motion on the merits of the ordinance itself. The second benefit is that the way this would come back before council is very simple. When a document exists and the committee that adjusts it recommends it back to council, it simply appears on the agenda. The sponsor, in this case, Mr. Zanfordino, would simply renew the motion to adopt, and then the normal process would take place. This allows this to happen without voting it down and then working on it some more and starting the process over. And I bring this up because it's a common procedure in Robert's Rules of Order, one we don't use in this council very often, but it does allow us to move forward in a way that I think will meet everybody's needs and not get us tied up in this log jam of running into the end of our table timeline. So, thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments they'd like to make?
Mr. President,
Ms. Rowland?
I know there are some people on council who feel the need to fine tune a few things. It's not going to change the intention, or it's not going to change the end product much from what the commission has already set out to do and has presented to us. But because I support this fully, 100, I mean, I want a human, or I want a historic preservation commission in the city of Bowling Green. I almost said a humane historic, but historic commission in the city of Bowling Green. But I also want for all members of council to feel comfortable that what they have had presented to them is indeed fully legal, meets their criteria for proper and adequate definition, and still fulfills the mandate set down by the Ohio Historic Commission. So I'm hoping this could be done rapidly, but I would support a postponement. I would prefer to have a date when it would be finished, but it's up to the president, not me. But I could live with this. I could support it.
I mean, I could support it this evening in its state, and I am not a lawyer, so I don't know some of the concerns that are surfacing. I know some of the concerns that I heard at the Planning Commission, I have no flexibility on issues like making this voluntary, supermajorities, 8 votes for a given individual. Those are things that no amount of time is going to move me on. But, you know, if there are specifics that will make people more comfortable with this, then I'm all for the postponement. But changing the general substance of this, I think would be a real shame and would be really consistent with our capitulation to resistance.
Right. And I just would like to say that I do feel that there is a difference between being in support of historic preservation and being in support of meaningful historic preservation. And some of the issues that I feel that came up during the Planning Commission process jeopardize the potential for meaningful historic preservation.
Yeah, Mr. President, point of order. I believe we're way off track. We are not in a period of debate. We can be very shortly.
I think Greg wants a motion and a second so that we can.
Mr. President, I had a question before we do any voting here.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So with the motion to postpone, we, and maybe Councilman Robinette said this and I missed it, we would need to establish a certain time for when that would be postponed to, correct?
No,
That-
you can
no.
do it either way. You can postpone indefinitely, which doesn't box you in, and you can also postpone to a date certain, which has the advantage of addressing that this is something timely that needs to be taken care of, but also runs into the danger of putting us up against a wall again.
Well, I think it's important that we put ourselves up against a wall, and I think the only issue here is that the wall is directly in front of us, right?
Well, at the moment, yes.
Mr. President. May I just comment that the president of council has other tools to speed this along as well. By simply assigning goals and dates
Right.
without
Mm.
legislatively binding us to them.
So what you're suggesting is that before we would make a motion and before there would be a motion to postpone, you would like me to discuss some possible parameters for
Uh,
committees and things like that?
Well, that's your call. I don't think that's appropriate. I mean, I think you can do that during the course of this meeting. And certainly do that during whenever you feel, actually, you can do that whenever you feel like it, I guess.
Okay.
But it's not required until the discussion of the issue, but
Right. So, I mean, are you suggesting that we have a motion and then discuss? Is that?
well, one way this could flow is that John could make a motion to adopt the ordinance. It would be seconded, and then I would make a subsequent motion to postpone, and then that would open up debate. And at that time,
We can-
everything's on the table for discussion,
Right.
including the ordinance itself.
Correct. Yep. Well then, so we're not out of order, John. Could you make a motion to adopt the ordinance?
Yes, Mr. President, I move that we adopt ordinance 878.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette,
I move to postpone indefinitely the motion to adopt ordinance 8878.
I will second that for the sake of discussion. Okay.
There we are.
So, I guess a sticking point we may have to get to before we finish this discussion is it has been suggested by Council Member Dennis that we postpone to a date certain, and the current motion is to postpone indefinitely. So that's something that we may have to address. Let me say that I was involved in the 2014 study group that looked at historic preservation. And I was, I guess, more than a little disappointed that it didn't really go anywhere at that point. And I was very excited to see the establishment of the HPC and all the hard work that they have done over the past year and a half. I kind of view this two different ways. One, we could vote this evening to adopt ordinance 8878 as it is, with the understanding that there are some changes that might be need to be made. And I could put together a study group to look at those changes, make recommendations through the committee process. And we could amend ordinance 8878 later. Now, an advantage to this is it sends the message that we are serious about historic preservation. And since the HPC, in order to get certified local government status, has to have an approved ordinance in order to begin that process, it would allow them to begin that process right away. The other option is with a postponement, whether the postponement is indefinitely or whether the postponement is to a date I arbitrarily set. That way we don't vote the ordinance down. We don't have to begin the entire process all over again. We have the ability to, again, send it to a study group to look over it, make changes through the committee process, and present us hopefully with a document that as soon as it is finished and council discusses it, council can vote on it without starting the entire process over again. So that's kind of how I see what our two options are this evening. One allows us time to make some corrections without voting no and without starting the whole process over again. The other, we pass the ordinance and then we can still have study group make suggestions for changes, amend at some later date. I think they both get us to the same place. It's just a question of which path people feel comfortable with taking. So that being said, I'll shut up briefly.
Mr. President, in terms of those two paths, since John's motion was to adopt and not to adopt as amended, that would mean that the changes that were made by the Historic Preservation Commission at the beginning of February as a result of the interaction with the Planning Commission would not be incorporated. And in the grand scheme of things, that may not matter because your intent is to come up with a final product. But it does introduce a little bit of complexity. If somebody was more in favor of the revised document after the Historic Preservation Commission had made their changes, then there might be a little bit of ambiguity on how to vote to adopt something that has not incorporated those. So with that in mind, I myself, if you were to determine what committee and what the charge was and the deadline for coming back to the full council, I would probably opt for the Greg Robinette gambit.
Any other comments?
Mr. President, I'd just like to say that I think I certainly support the effort. And I get a sensing that everybody on this council does too, although I haven't spoken with everybody individually. I also clearly have a sensing that I share that the language of the ordinance may not perfectly align with the intent of the HPC, not yet, but it's close. And I've seen a number of suggestions that aren't terribly onerous to fix that. Some of them came up in the public hearing today, some ideas to make some small cleanup, clean up some ambiguity and maybe some confusing language. I would suggest that process wouldn't necessarily take a great deal of time if shepherded through, by the right person. So again, I think we're close. I think we're very close. And I could foresee a situation where at the next meeting or the second meeting from now, we're voting on it in a form that everybody agrees to. Thank you.
So, Mr. President, if we set a date certain, would that be a given committee or would that be a committee that you would create for this purpose, including perhaps people from the HPC? If they're
We
available.
could have a discussion about what committee we think would be most useful.
But it would be an existing council committee.
I would think for the sake of expediency, that'd probably be best. As opposed to putting together an ad hoc committee of some kind.
Mr. Chairman, I would just propose that you give consideration to giving it to the committee of the whole. We all have had input from the public. We all have heard from the Historic District Commission. And I think they should be a part. They should be here to concur in agreement with what our changes are, because they are the historic district experts. We are not. We have Rachel, who's an attorney, and she can look at what she thinks might be a legal issue, bring it up to the commission. And we're all here to discuss and hear what the outcome is. Jeff is soon going to be an attorney, so he has some knowledge. Greg is an attorney. He has knowledge already. I just see it would be easy to use the committee of the whole with the direct involvement of the Historic District Commission.
Mr. President,
Yes, go ahead.
I think it's important for me to clarify what my reservations are about this law. As written, the substance here is fine. I think for me, some of the sticking points are, non-conforming or non-contributing is used 8 times here. 4 of them are hyphenated and 4 of them are not. So there are some drafting issues here that I think need to be addressed. In terms of the substance, I don't want to speak for anybody else on city council, but I don't think we need to do a whole lot of reworking on any of the provisions that have resulted from the 18 months of public input and work that the Historic Preservation Commission has put into this.
Anybody else?
I like Sandy's suggestion. Again, not my decision, but I think we all have interest. We all have a opinion on this. And I think a committee of the whole with public meetings, and then the committee, the HPC could come, if they'd like. But I think that would be a sage way to move forward.
Mr. President?
Yep.
I have the utmost confidence in your being able to make the right decision on that. I would suggest that whatever is decided, that the ordinance, once it gets into almost final form, is passed through the city attorney's office for his comment as well.
Mr. President,
Yep.
would this committee of the whole meeting, would it be just kind of like a working session? Would we take testimony from the public, or would we just be going through the legislation section by section?
I think at this point, with the public hearings that have existed on this, I really don't think there's much to be gleaned from further public meetings. I think if the problem with the historic ordinance as it exists now are, primarily legal concerns or editorial, editing issues, I think that those are things that we could address. I also agree that once we would address those things, that it would need to go to the city attorney to make sure that it was in pristine form before we amended it and voted on it.
Okay, Mr. President, I agree. I'm glad that you said that. I think that at least one representative of Historic Preservation Commission, should be there. It really seemed like Will Earhart and Nate Spittler from the Planning Commission took copious notes on this stuff. They might prove helpful. I think Heather Saylor should be there. And then I'm wondering if maybe Mr. Marsh couldn't just come to that meeting, and if everyone's in the room. I think I agree with Greg. I think that this we can do this pretty quickly. I think we're super close. And I'll just say, because I haven't spoken yet, just that I'm super happy to support this legislation. I mean, the more I've learned about historic preservation since I've been in this role, the more I'm excited for what it can mean for our community, especially as an economic development tool downtown. So, I am ready to move, and I think we're very close.
Okay. Before we vote, I get the sense that there's a consensus that we would benefit from being able to take one more crack at this before we pass it. Is that the general consensus? I'm not opposed to having a committee of the whole meeting in which we discuss things that each of us bring forward. I personally don't have any major concerns, but I understand that people do, and I'm willing to entertain those ideas. So perhaps we should schedule a committee of the whole meeting in which everybody brings their concerns forward, and we can decide which ones we want to include and which ones we want to not include. After that meeting, we'll send everything to Mr. Marsh for him to make corrections to the ordinance, and then it can come before us again, and we can vote to amend it and have an up or down vote on it. Does that sound like a reasonable way to proceed?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so is there any further discussion on this at the moment? Okay, which means the vote that we have before us is a vote to postpone indefinitely. Is that something everybody feels comfortable with, or would people feel better if I changed it to a postpone to a date certain? Now, keep in mind, if I postpone it to a date certain and we are finished with it and want to introduce it before that date, we cannot, because it has been postponed to a date certain. So what's the comments
I
on
think we
that?
have to vote on the motion that's on the floor, which is the indefinite one. Is that correct?
Right.
Right.
Okay,
Unless I
and then,
I'm just trying to explain
okay,
what
Right.
that means.
And if the will of the group was to postpone it to a date certain, I would imagine Greg and Mark would withdraw the motion.
Right.
I think that it would be postponed to a date really kind of soon, but I don't know if that's proper in Roberts.
Mark, I
Right.
would suggest, what date would you be proposing if we got to that point?
Well, I would want to have the committee of the whole meeting soon, before the next council meeting is out, because we have a meeting that night.
We
That's
have
correct.
time from 6 to 6:05.
Okay, well, that should give us plenty of time.
but there's
Um,
nothing prior to the 15th
Yeah.
scheduled at this time.
I mean, I hear council members telling me that we're close and that this shouldn't be too difficult, but my experience tells me that that's very optimistic. And I don't know if maybe we should schedule this meeting on a day where it's not backed up against something else rather than scheduling it prior to a council meeting.
Would you consider next Monday evening, Mr. President?
Is there anything
7
in,
o'clock or earlier?
is there anything in council chambers next Monday evening?
No, no BPU. No, there's nothing scheduled at this time. On the 22nd, correct? Is that what you're talking about?
Wait a minute, my phone's not cooperating.
That would be the
Yeah, you just-
22nd, next Monday.
Okay, so the potential. So let's say we met on February 22nd and we were able to iron out all of these things. And then we send it to Mr. Marsh for him to fix things. Are we confident that we would be ready for this by our March 1st meeting? Or just to give us just a little breathing room, maybe, if we did it to a date certain, what about March 15th's meeting?
Mr. President, I think that's a prudent decision. Let's remind ourselves that while we may all think this is a great idea, the city's been living without it for a couple hundred years. A month is not the end of the world. And as you point out, it gives us time, for example, if there are issues that we want to talk about a second time at a second meeting in that same week. So I would fully support withdrawing my original motion and replacing with one to a date certain of the 15th of March. I think that's a reasonable goal. Let's remember that if we had voted this down and started over, it would take many, many more weeks than that. And that this 1 month, if we get it right, is a small issue.
I think that the original motion to table indefinitely gives us the kind of flexibility. We can have the best intention possible, but stuff happens. And if we have a path forward and we execute that path, great. If we hit some sort of a bump in the road, then okay, fine. We don't have to worry about extending it. It's to indefinite. So that flexibility, we may end up wanting that flexibility. And I really don't think that, I mean, one motivation for putting a date certain is to light a fire under us so that we, hunker down and get it done. But I really don't think we need to be concerned about that right now. We are all motivated to get this going. And I don't think there is an appreciable risk of this just simply being forgotten about and not taken up. So I guess I would opt for the flexibility and having a plan, but having the flexibility if something happens.
Mr. President?
Ms. Phipps?
I'm wondering, just to use our time most efficiently, can we all send our proposed changes to one person to, compile and then, set an agenda at how we're going to tackle this? We all think there's small changes, but maybe we all think those are different small changes. I'm just wondering how best to use our time.
Real quickly, one person's small changes turn into 7 people's small changes, which are larger numbers of small changes. I guess what I would do is I would ask people to compile what they think the changes need to be, and then share their concerns, their suggested changes with other council members in the form of an email that everyone can bring to this meeting of the whole, and then we can have a discussion on them. So I would want everyone to be prepared when we came to that meeting.
So it might be helpful to set a deadline for everyone to send their email with red line changes in the Word document. So we have time in advance to review those. So we all come super duper prepared. I would like that. That would be helpful.
Well, I mean,
No?
I would trust everyone to be professional and expedient, and I don't want to micromanage people. Uh,
I love to be micromanaged. Okay.
But I guess, so what we need to decide here is, do we want to postpone indefinitely, which possibly sends the message that it could be postponed indefinitely, or do we want to postpone to a date certain, let's say March 15th? And if it requires that we meet more than one time, in that time, we meet more than one time in that, but the date certain advantage is that it shows that this is a matter of importance to us and does set a deadline. So
Mr. President,
you already said you want to do indefinitely. Let someone else have a turn.
I will. I just want to give some additional supporting evidence. If you take a look at the clock, it has taken us a while to get to this point on deciding whether to be indefinite or not. So we may want to err on the side of not setting a date because it's taken us so long to figure out whether to set a date or not.
I think a
Mr.
lot of the things we're
President.
going to be discussing are not going to take 35 minutes. So I think a date certain, I certainly prefer. I think we owe it to the commission, frankly, and we owe it to the fact this has been a 7-year issue in Bowling Green.
Yes, I agree with what you say, John.
Thank you, Sandy.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I would agree with that as well. I think at the very latest, we should be able to arrive at a final version here by the 15th at the very latest. I think what John said about owing it to the commission members who have now spent the better part of 2 years drafting this legislation, for us to not be able to find time on our calendars over the next month to go through their work and put together something that we feel comfortable passing, I think is not reasonable.
Okay. Well, Greg, it sounds like the consensus is we'd prefer to do a date certain.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
I withdraw my motion to postpone indefinitely.
Will you withdraw your second, Mark?
I'll withdraw my second.
Mr. President?
Do we need to vote on?
No,
No.
now we need a
There's nothing to
motion.
vote on.
I
except-
need we
Postpone
need a
to-
motion and I'm going to make one.
Okay.
I'm going to say we postponed to a date certain, and that being March 15th, 2021.
Second,
Okay. It's been properly moved and seconded.
And that means it comes off the table for a vote by
Not on
March
the table.
15th.
It's not on the table.
Well, okay,
It'll
you're
just
right.
come
It's
back
not on
onto
the table.
agenda. Right.
We
You're right,
simply
yeah.
have to
Be done.
vote on it.
Okay, I get
Okay. So it's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on postponing to the date certain of, what was it, March 15th?
Yes.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none. Okay.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland.
Yes,
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
yes,
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh.
Yes. Okay, so ordinance 8878 has been postponed to March 15th, 2021.
Technically, it's the motion to adopt that's been postponed.
Right,
Yes.
exactly. Okay, so is there any other business to come before council?
Is council going to meet on the 22nd?
Yeah, Mr. President, what is the plan?
Right. What?
Okay.
I was just officially moving us into that portion of
Because I
it.
have a question, a request related to that.
Okay, so go ahead, share.
My request to Kay is please send everyone a Word document version of the ordinance as submitted adoption. We're all working off the same.
Right, which would be the original one, not the one that Heather sent today, because you
So-
didn't amend.
But I was just asking if you would send one to all of us, clearly marked, this is the one we're working, so that there's no misunderstanding. Or
Yeah.
somebody could.
And- yeah, and I'd like
one you
another
sent to
copy
Dana.
that the committee submitted.
There's multiple
No.
versions floating around. I would just,
Yeah.
I simply ask that we all get the same version to
Okay.
amend.
All right.
And my piggyback on that request is that it is the February 5th version that the Historic Preservation Committee
Heather or
Commission
somebody
came
said
up
that.
with.
That's-
Right.
Right.
Mine says on it, edited version, post
Post
PC
2000.
meeting
Well-
2/5/2021.
Yeah,
I'm
that,
sure.
yeah.
I'll send it out.
Thank
Okay, so that will be the version that we will be working from. The suggested meeting date is 1 week from today. That would be February 22nd. Council meeting of the whole time. Does 6 o'clock
6
work?
o'clock. 6 o'clock.
Can
Works.
everybody make 6 o'clock work?
Yeah.
Yes, we can, Mark.
Okay, so that meeting will be at 6 o'clock to an indefinite time. And okay, and then I guess we also will want to send out invitations. There might be certain people we want to have available at this meeting, correct? Couple members of the HPC.
Well, they're all here.
Okay.
There-
It's going to be an open meeting, right?
It's an open meeting,
Okay, but we're doing invitations.
but
in
if there's,
addition.
yeah,
No,
No
open,
public-
there's no public participation. However, what the president's suggesting is we may want to ask people questions.
Right.
We would like them to be there to be able to answer questions. It
yeah.
would not be part of the meeting per se. That's council only.
In case somebody had clarification about what the intent of a certain passage was, something like that.
Can we ask
Sure.
by a nod of head if the members can be here? Well, they said at least 2, but if you want all to be here, that's, okay. Okay, that's good. No, we can ask you questions. Well, you're going to have some amendments, you might, because they're not going to be included in this draft we get from post February 5th.
If I were to ask, hey, Les, what do you think about this? That would be a question. Would you consider input? Okay.
Okay. So are there any other questions that need answered about this meeting?
Did you want to set a deadline on us getting comments, the time, or bring them to the meeting?
Bring them to them. What if I want to read someone else's stuff ahead of time? Well, but I can't if they don't send them to me. Let's at least give everyone the weekend. So can everyone have their things typed up and mail them to other council members by, let's say, 5 p.m. on Friday?
That could we maybe move it into Saturday?
Well, we could move it to the time the meeting starts if you want to.
No, I'd rather have it be some additional time if need be, so that we have, like, make it noon on Saturday or 2 on Saturday or 2:17. 2:17 on Saturday is pretty good.
Are you trying to give me a stroke?
No, no, I don't have to try.
Midnight on Friday. Send them out by midnight on Friday. Any other business to come before council? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Okay, properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.